Welcome to Success Redefined with Dr. Tony Warner. I'm Dr. Tony, mom of 5, psychotherapist, author, and mentor. Here, you're going to find insightful discussions spanning science, psychology, and soul as the personal and professional meet, and we explore the intersection of what really matters. So success can be redefined with connection, healing, and fulfillment in mind. I'm joined by Liz Garrett in this episode to have this unique twist on a conversation around leadership. We're going to talk about how the brain and the body can be impacted by burnout and how that can affect our experience with success and the ways in which we show up as leaders in our lives. We also talk about what contributes to burnout beyond what just mainstream discourse tends to focus on, and a different perspective on how to approach addressing things like burnout that affect us as leaders. Liz Garrett is an internationally certified coach, trainer, speaker, and author. She specializes in whole being, well-being to help professionals beat burnout and enjoy a meaningful, sustainable, lucrative career. Liz spent almost 20 years in science and engineering in various roles before she herself burnt out. In a long climb back, she researched and established lifestyle practices that support her mind, her body, and her spirit, and now she's passionate about helping other high-performing professionals create sustainable success. Liz's experience and education give her a unique perspective. She holds a bachelor's in biology, a master's in psychology, and has additional credits in areas like being a certified trainer, certified health and wellness coach, organizational resilience, ICF associate, certified coach, emotional intelligence, and others. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. If you're interested further in Liz's work, she is also the author of 2 books, The Opposite of Burnout, The Crisis Edition 2020, and Intentionology, 365 Days of Living on Purpose, available on Amazon. Let's go ahead and get started with this conversation. Hello, everyone. I am just over the moon to be able to have my friend and colleague with me today, Liz Garrett. And it's funny I use that saying over the moon because
I was going to say, you said moon.
Liz loves to talk and teach about the moon. So you must have just somehow unconsciously solicited that from me. I don't know, but I am over the moon for you to be here today because we get to have such great conversations behind the scenes all of the time. And to be able to share it with the world is something that is just, it's near and dear to my heart to be able to do. So thank you so much, Liz, for being with us today.
Mine too. I feel tingly. It means so much that we're sharing this space together. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're going to be talking about topics that, I'm not going to lie, sometimes I want to roll my eyes a little because it's become mainstream. And when certain topics become mainstream, I have found that the message gets muddied down and can get lost in just the mainstream discourse and division and things like that. And when we do that, I think that we're missing out on some really deep conversations and deep opportunities for growth and healing. So I'm really glad that you're here to talk about this. We're going to be talking about things like burnout and how that affects the brain and the body and what success has to do with any of it, right? Like, how does success come into play and all of those things. But burnout has it's become a buzzword, don't you think?
It really has. And once it becomes a buzzword, we diminish it and we forget it and we downplay it and we roll our eyes. Me too, because it becomes just a word that is a conversational crutch rather than a diagnosis that can take your life. It's serious and people suffer. And it's debilitating and the numbers are high. In fact, just for our conversation, I looked up to see if we had any 2023 data yet, and we do. And we now know that over 70% of employees, so the workforce, over 70% are reporting signs of burnout. So it's epidemic. It's epidemic. It's serious.
Mhm.
And the main thing that makes it serious is that it's sneaky. And once it comes in, it steals our joy.
Yeah.
And our joy, right? Isn't that the reason? I mean, what is success? What is success if it's not we're creating a life that makes us happy, joyful, expressive, creative, whatever? But burnout will smother that.
Yeah, because the experience of burnout is real, right? Like, we don't want to diminish that. It's not an actual medical diagnosis, right? But it is absolutely something that can contribute to and create, right, other diagnoses that wind up needing some medical support. But a lot of people don't realize this because it's become a buzzword. They talk about it as though burnout became this epidemic level experience for folks as a result of COVID. But if you look back before COVID at the stats, that's not true. It actually was considered an epidemic. Burnout itself was considered an epidemic, I believe, by the World Health Organization prior to COVID. So this is not a new thing, especially for Americans, but for others as well. This is not a new thing. And I'm glad that it's getting more light. I'm glad that it's getting more attention. You're right, because we hope that that leads to more solutions and healing. But the context sometimes I think is misconstrued, right? And then that can make people like
For sure.
want to blame certain things or people, which can, I think, wind up being counterproductive. What do you think about that?
Well, yeah, for sure. And I think one of the reasons, and great, yes, burnout was epidemic before the pandemic, before we were locked down, before we experienced that trauma. But what's different now, and the numbers that I found show it, millennials, so the generation that's usually the go-getter, they're in their 30s plus or minus right now. They're burning out.
Mm.
They are the most burned out generation yet. And then right behind them, the Gen Zers who are basically coming into the workforce, the oldest ones are in their 20s right now. They have doubled since last year, the number who are reporting burnout. So it's not only increasing in numbers, which it is, but it's hitting a different population
Mm-hmm.
that creates a new problem. A new problem. How do we address that? And one more last thing about the numbers, because I don't want to be all numbers, but it was also interesting. C-suite reported higher numbers than ever, not burnout, but considering leaving their job, leaving their career for mental health or well-being reasons.
Mm.
So I think that's an indicator too.
That is,
It's reshaping itself.
oh, well, I could have a whole conversation on that, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a double-edged sword, right? If you're
Yeah.
needing to leave because of mental health and wellness, that of course that's something that needs to be addressed. And also, if they're choosing to leave because of mental health and wellness, that's something to be celebrated because we're prioritizing that more.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the importance is just that we start to hear that word burnout and take it seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And that we recognize it in ourselves, because burnout has in the past been sort of like a badge of honor, like a badge of honor. Oh, I'm so burned out, but I'm going to go in on Saturday. Right.
Yes.
But the bill comes due. The bill comes due collectively, in our workforce and our families, but it also comes due individually, because we give so much of ourselves to work. If we're, burning out, I have quotes in case we're not recording this. If we're burning out, we're burning aspects of our being that we brought to this earth to share with others. Where we each have that fire inside that is ours to manage and to give to the world. And I think that's what burnout steals.
You just reminded me of something that came to me, I think maybe last year or so. And it's going to sound a little bit religious, but that's not how I mean it. It's not intended to be religious at all. But when I was a kid, that song, "This Little Light of Mine, I'm going to let it shine. This little," right? "Don't let Satan it out. I'm going to let it shine." And last year, I was in contemplation about something. I don't even remember what it was, but that song came back to me in the way that you were just explaining our flame, our internal burning flame of inspiration that's here, that's meant to be shared and spread with the world, but that can burn out, can get blown out. And again, I'm not referring to the religious sense, but just it is so interesting for me to put those two together. That song holds different meaning, different significance for me. I'll sing it to myself sometimes in my head, I'm like, all right, like let your light shine, let your light
Yeah.
shine. And when we're burning out, it's getting huffed out, it's getting blown out, it's getting suffocated, right? And that flame inside of us, whether or not someone is more into the science or the psychology or the soul behind this, there is this figurative and very visceral experience that we can feel, whether we can put words or stats to it or whatever. Like can't we, like I could feel it, and I'll share some of my experience, but can't you like feel it? You feel it suffocating,
Yeah.
lowering, diminishing in some way.
Yeah, and there's truth to it. You reference religious truth. All traditions reference a fire, a flame, our inner knowing, our inner light. And I find, for myself, that it's been my guiding light. My experience, because I did burnout, I suffered burnout in my 30s. I entered the workforce in science, and it was a time of opportunity, and I rose to that opportunity, but without recognizing my own limitations. And that's also one of the sneaky parts of burnout is the people who think they're immune that are most vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, I'm smart, I'm hardworking, I'm gonna, plow through. Eventually, it gets you. So when I did lose my career in science, my marriage, my home, my health, hospitalization, and then had to rebuild it. Um, that little light inside was the thing I had to find and follow.
Mm.
That was the thing I had to trust when I couldn't trust anything else. It was the thing I had to get curious about, because honestly, I was very outward focused before. And now I was going back to something that had been a constant in my life that I had never recognized or put a name to. And it's been a few decades now since I burned out. And it has a happy ending because I did redirect my life on a path that has me serving in my strengths and in alignment with my values. And every day I wake up ready to do that. But I do that because I keep checking that flame, keep feeling. And it's kind of a gut feeling, because we do kind of, my hands right now are pointing to my gut, because that's where many of us sense it. That's where many of the spiritual, religious traditions place our inner knowing. But there's science too that aligns with that. We now know we have a whole neurology in our gut that can sense things before our brain can. So lots of wisdom there for us to access.
Mm. That's so true. And for me, that flame, it it became the intersection of the science and the psychology and the soul all together for me. Of I don't have to try to define all of this through science. I don't have to try to explain all of it through my, psychology background. I don't have to try to just fully say, "Oh, I'm blindly trusting to, whatever." I don't have to it intersected all three of them for me in a really potent way. So, why don't we take a step back, because you and I have both experienced burnout, and for me, I didn't know it at the time, but it directly came from these unconscious beliefs that I had around what success was supposed to look like for myself. And I made myself the exception. I didn't necessarily hold other people up to the same standard as me. Oh no, it's okay. I know, but for me, right? Like I had this high standard, and I had to do it all, and I didn't think. I didn't think stress was getting to me. I didn't think stress could get to me because I was the one that held it all together. That was my role. That was my role that I had internalized in my family. It wasn't necessarily a role that they put on me. It was a role that I took on for myself because of the stuff that was going on. And so I needed to keep it together, especially when other people were falling apart. I needed to be able to get it done, and I needed to be able to work really hard to show that I was of value in some way so that I could feel wanted. And that directly connected with like, okay, that's it. That's the success, right? Is other people don't have to be burdened by me and they can rely on me and I temporarily feel like I'm of value to them. And that was this
And that will make them want you.
yes, like it was unhealthy. We all need connection, and so we'll find it in some way, whether it's healthy or not, right? But
Right.
it did define the way in which I pursued success in my life, unbeknownst to me at the time.
There are beautiful nuggets in your story there, Tony. That was a strength. You have that strength. That is an inherent strength that came with the package of you. It's probably in your DNA somewhere in the little coding that writes who we are. And it was a strength you could offer to people you loved, who needed you. What happened was you hadn't learned yet how to manage your strength in a sustainable way so it could last all the years of your life. You leaned into that strength, you found that strength, you recognized that beautiful strength. But just like anything, if you have a beautiful car or great house or a good pair of new shoes, we have to manage them, care for them, moderate them if we want them to last. I bet you're still strong though, right?
I think that can be a beautiful way to put it. One of the things, we all find ways to adapt. We just do, right? That's how we navigate life. We find ways to adapt. And what once was helpful for us, at some point, if our environments change, our relationship changes, if things change, we're no longer in that age and stage and season of life, then we need to continue to adapt, right? But oftentimes what used to work for us just no longer is, or it needs to be changed in some way. And without an awareness, we can't change it. But I'm curious about your burnout story, and if does yours relate to anything that I shared with mine, or is yours like completely different? How would you describe your burnout?
No, mine was similar. I think there is what I would say compelled my performance was a survival instinct.
Mm-hmm.
I was raised in a family that did not value education, and I saw that as my way out. I tested, in fourth grade when they test you, I tested in with the smart kids, and they were all going to college. And so I followed along behind them, thinking that that's what people do. And I submitted applications, got accepted, and my parents said, "What are you doing?"
Mm.
Nobody in our family's ever gone to college, and if we did, it wouldn't be a girl.
Mm.
So in that moment, well, I actually remember I went out on my porch and I cried and I saw my future fade away. And then I said, oh, hell no, I'm going to find a way. So I essentially got in my car eventually, drove to local colleges, showed up at the admissions office and said, I'd like to go to school here. Can you help me? And I found a way. But I had to work 1, 2, or 3 jobs to pay for my rent, my car, my tuition. And that digging in felt like it was life or death to me.
Mm-hmm. Mhm.
And once I did graduate with my bachelor's, I got a full time job, but I didn't stop that ethic, that programming that I had adopted at that point. I didn't question it. I said, well, it got me this far. Let's see how far it can get me now. And I didn't manage it.
Mhm.
Down.
There's that flavor of like you have something to prove. And I had that too. I wouldn't have admitted it at the time because I wouldn't have realized it, but I had something to prove because I just felt so much like I didn't belong and I wasn't wanted and I wasn't whatever. And so I felt like I had something to prove. And ultimately into adulthood, because I know we're talking also here about, the effect of all this on our brains and our bodies. In adulthood, in my 20s, I started losing hair, started
Yeah.
having panic attacks,
Yeah.
and I was fatigued and I felt it was like a back and forth numbness and hypervigilance cycle that I would experience. And still, and still, I was like, no, this can't be stress. There has to be a medical reason for this. I went to as many specialists as I could, got all these different tests, all these things, and no one could find anything besides, like back, um, what was it? I had mono or Epstein Barr, which I think are used interchangeably. I don't know if they still are anymore. When I was younger, and how that can sit dormant and that can come up and contribute to some of these things. But there was not a medical reason that could be found. And so finally, I had to admit to myself that I was burnt out. Like that I had to get to that low. I had to get to that
Wow.
place
Wow.
of my brain, my body. I couldn't think straight, right? Like that we call it brain fog that can happen with burnout. I
Mhm.
had to get to that place. If I hadn't got to that place, I would have kept trucking along. I
Yep.
would have kept
Yep.
going because I could do it, right? I could get it done, super
Yep.
independent, all that stuff until it stopped working. My brain, my body, my soul, everything was like, no, this is not lining up. You
Right.
cannot keep doing this.
Even though you wanted to, your body said no. Yeah, same thing. Same thing here, except for mine. The main symptom that stopped me was I developed this terrible coughing that no doctor could diagnose. I couldn't move. It would be debilitating. I would lie on the floor gasping for breath
Mm.
because I couldn't breathe. Um, and like you, it's like, just give me a moment, I'll get back to my desk. It's like, you know, and I laugh. I'm laughing because what I understand now is the body is talking to us, and I was not
Yep.
listening. And at first, it talks like a little feather, like I'm just going to get your attention with a little piece of information here. But if we ignore it long enough, it hits us upside the head with a 2x4. It's like, okay, you're not listening. Here you go. You're going to listen now. And that's what happens. It takes us down, and um, it's ultimately for our good, potentially, uh, to be rendered, to be humbled. I was humbled
Mm.
to realize I had limitations. I was humbled to realize that with all of my hard work, and I had success by most measures at that time, the measures I thought that mattered, but I was not happy. I was in a marriage that was not a marriage. It was not, there was no connection. I did not have a relationship that supported my well being. I was doing some fun things, but they mostly involved kind of self neglect,
Mm.
maybe even to self abuse with, staying up late and drinking and, going lots of places. And um, yeah, so it's what I know now is to pay attention to those little body signals. That when I feel a headache, it means to slow down.
Mm.
When I'm tired, it's not because something's wrong with me. It's because I need to rest. And that up and down, in and out cycle is a part of life. It is our biology.
Yeah, it's so true. And I'm glad we're having this conversation around burnout and the way it shows up in our lives overall, because I think a lot of conversations focus on burnout in the workplace. And I we're going to touch on that because I do think that's important. But it's also important for us to be aware that burnout is an internal experience, right? And so we can't only focus on burnout in the workplace, because ultimately, whether we leave the workplace or not, which I had to leave multiple when I was in these bouts of burnout, trying to navigate how to sustainably exit the burnout phase of my life. Right. So, yes, we can leave the workplace if that's ultimately what we need to do. But then we still are the ones, right, that need to manage some of the internal or environmental factors that contribute to burnout within our lives, within ourselves, whether it's the boundaries that we're lacking, or whether it's the definition of success, like we were just talking about, that we have to, just deal with it, or we have to constantly battle different people, handle it in different ways, or we have to be the one that holds it all together all of the time. That can show up a lot in the workplace. And therefore, if the workplace isn't a very healthy one, or isn't one that knows how to manage, right, when someone's in these these places of patterns that aren't healthy, then of course we see burnout happen there. But we still need to come back to ourselves. I think it's not either or, it's both and.
Yes, it's a paradox. It's a paradox, especially when we're leaders and we're influencing others with our very presence. That ability to make others okay because you allow yourself to be authentic and with whatever your truth is. That ability to allow others to grow their internal flame while you are also managing your own. That doesn't have to be one or the other. It's a mindset, but it's also a skill set, and it can be learned and taught, or at least exemplified for others.
Mm.
So it's that paradox that as we progress in our career and then we influence more people, it's that paradox that is, simultaneously a challenge, but it's also a beautiful opportunity where we can keep coming back. Here is how I'm feeling. Here's how I want to show up. Here's how I want to influence it. How can I do that? Well, I think I need a little meditation right now, or I think I need to go read something inspirational, or I think I just need to jog around the block, need some fresh air. I need to center. What is it I need to do to get to that space I want to be in as I am present and influencing others?
What helped you with navigating your burnout experience, in particular around how you managed the checking in with your body? Because you used a lot, from what you just shared, you used a lot of your education, right? A lot of your know-how to lead. It's probably part of what made you really good at science, right? And being able to wrap your head around that and share that with people. And that's a beautiful thing, right? But if we go head heavy all the time, then we can easily numb out or avoid or just not pay attention to the rest of our body, which ultimately does need our attention and calls out to us, as you were saying. So what helped you begin to bridge the awareness of the rest of your body and what was happening with it and what it needed as you were navigating burnout?
Yep. Head heavy. I like that term you just used. We do give the brain a lot of credit, and the brain's awesome. Love my brain, love your brain, love all the brains. Brains are good, but they're not everything. And they're wired for survival, not thrival. And we have to make some decisions if we want to experience thrival. So for me, I can't answer that question as if it's a done deal, because honestly, Tony, I'm still learning. Every day is a practice, every day. And some are back, some are forward. It's a commitment to a growth path. But I think essentially what I've come to understand is that all of the informational inputs matter. So, what I mean by that is if I'm feeling like I don't like something or I'm not comfortable by something that's happening, I don't need my head to validate that. I don't need a reason. I don't need language. It is what it is. Truth is bigger than words. In the beginning of this conversation, when we were talking about the analogy, the metaphor of the flame inside, science, religion, spiritual traditions, all of those are just languages that are expressing a truth we all know.
Mm.
And in doing so, they sort of reduce it.
Mm.
So I've come to a place in my own path where I can sense what feels true or not, whether I can put language around it or not. I trust it, I honor it, and I enjoy exploring it,
Wow.
because I've learned that if I don't, the price of not exploring this need, desire, growth, whatever it is that's stirring inside of me, the price is higher than anything it could cost me by actually pursuing it or exploring it.
Mm. The truth is bigger than words. I wrote that down.
Words are always a reduction
Yeah.
of our experience of our truth.
Yeah. I mean, because they language is limited, right? It's a beautiful thing and it's a very important and helpful thing. And also,
It's powerful.
yeah,
Our words create our reality, and still they're a
it's
limitation, they're a
it's
reduction.
limited. And there's this experience that we have where if we're only focused on what we can and can't explain, which oftentimes can come into play with when it comes to success, right? Success is knowing what you're talking about, right? And either
KPIs, let's hit those.
always being right, or at least always being able to figure things out, or kind of like it's like a control type of thing. But what I'm hearing and what you just said is almost like an okayness with the not knowingness, which is hard for a lot of folks, especially if they're high achievers like you and I. And that's a bit more of the trust, the faith, the surrender than it
Mhm.
is the control, the force, the figuring it out all on our own.
Well, that's the humbling piece. I used to think I could control and force and figure it out until I couldn't.
Yep.
And now I know. So I guess I'll go with that.
Sometimes I still have to be reminded,
Yes,
everyone.
that's true. That's true. And life has a way of humbling us quickly if we need that reminder. That feather comes along. Hello, Lizzie. Do you remember this? Just checking.
But that's a big key right there. What you just said is that awareness of self, that our physical self, our body, and then our soul, whether someone calls like God or their connection with creation or universe or whatever terminology someone wants to use, this life force energy, that feather or that tapping on your shoulder is there. But if we're not paying attention, we don't feel it, we don't notice it, we don't pay mind to it. And if we are paying attention, then we have a choice. Are we going to kind of beat ourselves up for it? Or are we going to overthink it? Or are we going to allow it? Allow
Surrender to it, align with it. Yeah, that becomes, I've tried it all.
it.
And eventually that becomes the only choice. And a large part of it, too, another part for me anyway, in my journey, has been sort of a return to who I am truly. So I think it was there when I was a child. I was in a neglectful, abusive household, so it got hidden quick. But I can get glimpses of it, and it had to do with nature, and it had to do with what I would now call spirituality, because I thought that I could, I was involved in my church, and I thought I could see and hear angels talking to me a lot. So I remember those aspects and I associate them with my true self. And now, as an adult, um, I have, well, I think my journey has been to connect with that more and more. Nature, nature reflects our nature. So our relationship with time, um, our rhythmic, cyclic nature, all of the things that nature is doing. Like we are recording this in the middle of winter. And so the days are short, the nights are long. I have a stack of books that winter's not going to be long enough. I can already tell. But by the time spring comes, I probably will be outside not thinking about books. So I have not always been in touch. And you mentioned the moon earlier. That's the closest celestial body. It's a one that can pull the tides. It affects us. It has a 29 and a half day cycle that we feel too. And those, just accessing the moon's cycle is an easy way to click back into our own cycle. When I work with people and help them get attuned to the moon, which is a fun thing I do a free new moon Zoom on, every month. Um, and I've done it for 3 years now. And I keep thinking, am I going to quit it? No, I enjoy it. So I keep doing it because I hear things like this. Wow, Liz, I can't believe I know when the full moon is without looking at my calendar now. Or I really do feel the dark moon and I know when I need to sleep now. So it's sort of reactivates our familiarity with our own cycles when we notice what nature is doing.
And if we put this in the context of success and how we define success, I think oftentimes, and you definitely chime in if you agree or disagree, we create the idea of success as being this linear progression, right? Which is, I do this thing, maybe I get this training or this education or this promotion or this money or whatever. I hit this milestone, hit this goal. And then I go to the next one. It just keeps going up and 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 up. And it's just like
Arbitrarily up.
right. And it's like that's not sustainable especially if what requires us, what it's calling for from us is to constantly be focused on the goal or the next thing. There's no pause for enjoyment. There's no enjoying the journey. But what you just said was about the cycles and the seasons. And that is different. That is different than our linear definitions of success and how it's supposed to be pursued and how it's supposed to look, that we're always supposed to just go from one step to the next, going up, moving up all the time, when in reality, our life experience, I have had the same experience of there's these cycles. It's cyclical and not in just one space. It's not like you just go around the same circle over and over again. It's a moving circle, right? It's, you can kind of go around and you can, move left and right and up and down. It's moving, but that's not a bad thing. And yet we think if like we're not being successful or we're failing or something, if we're not constantly pushing ourselves to go that linear straight, constantly measurable up and up and up and up, which contributes then to burnout.
Right. Yep. 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 That drive upward serves other people. It serves a model. It serves an economic model, um, and we're programmed with that idea very early. So question that upward drive. Yes, that upward drive. If it's not your own, it's not going to get you where you need to be. It's like that old story of climbing the ladder and finding out it was on the wrong mountain. But the spiral, we are on a spiralic journey. We come around the same place over and over, but we see it from a different perspective. And when we become conscious of the path and what we want to experience, we begin to accumulate experiences that draw in more of what we want to experience, so that it's an upward spiral, so that it's building, it's growing, it's leading us to a life that's full of the people, the places, the things, the experiences that we want to have. So recognizing, yes, I was here a year ago. I hope I'll be here a year from now. How am I different and how do I want to be? Allows me to do the work, to set the intentions, to hold the space for what I am becoming.
Yeah. And I think that gives us more grace. For me, I'll speak about my experience and even experiences that I've seen others that I've supported go through is this idea that we can cycle back around, but from different places, to challenges that we have, to lessons that we are learning, to muscles that we are figuratively exercising, to parts of ourselves that we are growing. It gives us so much more space for grace, which then affects our brain and our body, right? Because when we are stressing out, beating up on ourselves, shaming and blaming ourselves, or shaming and blaming other people, that all creates internal stress, duress, and that makes it harder for us to connect with ourselves, to do what we need to do to tend to ourselves. But if there's some grace, if there's some space for compassion for yourself, it allows you to have some space for compassion for others. And so for me, it's been a part of the journey has been allowing that space for compassion, that space for grace, to say, it's okay that I'm revisiting this thing that I thought that I was, air quotes, past, right? I thought I had figured this out and I was done with this. No, I have done a lot of healing in this area, or I have done a lot of growth in this area. And also I can either heal or grow or just learn from a different perspective now, right? And that is beneficial too. That is advantageous too. And there's nothing bad or wrong about that. In fact, it's what we do in our world every year, is move through the same seasons in different ways, right?
Oh, yes, absolutely. The earth is going around the sun over and over. So are we. We're on it. Yeah.
Hmm.
And what you were just saying there reminded me of, I would describe it as a sense of empowerment. I would say that in my 20s, when I was scrapping and hustling, I did not realize how powerful I was. I acted powerful. I appeared powerful. I pretended I was powerful because I was a boss. I had control over a lot of things. But I didn't feel powerful inside. But now I feel my own power.
Hmm.
I know what I'm capable of. There is nothing that can make me doubt that now, even when it's hard, even when I am digging deep. I know it's there, and I didn't always know that.
So you shifted from this exerting external power, which is again aligned with what we're often told success should look like, especially for leaders and in corporate, to this internal sense of power that allowed you to not need to
Right,
exert that external
right,
force.
right. And you talk about grace. I don't go through my day worrying if I'm going to survive anymore. I've been around the sun enough times, been around that spiral to see it works out. Things work out. If I make that person mad because I say no, oh well, they'll get over it.
I'm allowed to say no.
I'm allowed to say no. I am the person who knows what it takes to manage me.
Yeah. Mm.
Nobody else gets to decide that.
And it's very different, right? Than a few decades ago. So, Liz, looking back, on our conversation today,
Mm,
as well as just your life experience that you've reflected on over the decades, what would you say your new redefined definition of success is for yourself, per se?
mm, mm. You don't ask small questions, do you, Toby?
Yeah, you know me.
Um, what would I say my redefined definition of success is for me now? Uh, it's joy.
Mm,
I mean, honestly, I no longer am working or going out with my friends or whatever it is I choose to do for any other reason, even this talk with you, any other reason than is there going to be some joy in it? Then I'm in.
mm.
And joy, there's another word that people would almost roll their eyes at, but my early life did not have enough of it. So I'm making up for it now.
Joy.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah. Does it bring me joy? Does it allow me to share joy? That's what I want to do then.
yeah. And there's so much to that because allowing yourself joy, prioritizing joy, bringing joy into your main definition of what success is for you in your life, it didn't take one or two things for that to happen. It didn't happen overnight. Like that was a journey that allowed that redefined definition of success for you in your life. Yeah.
Yeah. And closely related to that for me is the word beauty, beauty. But I don't mean it in the way that may automatically come to mind. I mean that there's beauty in everything, in all the cycles of nature, even in the loss, even in the suffering. In my own life, given enough time, I can find some beauty in it, and that brings joy, joy over suffering, but a sense of joyfulness in a world where there's strife.
Hmm, that's beautiful. It's so beautiful. Oh, I always appreciate our conversations, and I know there's a million directions that we could have taken this conversation at any point in time because of the variety of pieces that come into play when we talk about burnout in our brains and our bodies and success and all of this stuff. But I really appreciate this conversation that we had today and that you were willing to share yourself and your story in this space and time with us. So thank you so, so much.
Tony, thank you. When I think about it, all of these conversations that you and I have that seem to, cover a wide gamut, really are just language pointing to the same experience, and that's
Mm-hmm.
what we both value.
That's a great way to put it. I like that. Language pointing to the same, or at least a similar
Mhm.
experience.
We're multilingual, but it's all just an attempt to express the same thing.
Mm.
That life is, something to experience in terms of our own definition of success.
Yes. And success is about an experience, not all about an outcome. So it ties into that so nicely. Liz, if folks want to either follow you, connect with you, find more
Right.
about your work and what you do, where could they find you?
Well, my website's a good central place, so it's lizgarrett.com. I do have a 7-day upward spiral email series that helps people get that little starting point to build success upon success in an upward spiral way. Perhaps you can share that link.
I would love to. Is that also on your website or is it a separate link?
Maybe it will be by the time we talk.
Well, we'll just
It should be.
we'll put both of them in
Okay.
the show notes. We'll put both links into your website and then also the direct link to that, so that either way, it'll be easy to access for any.
Right. But with that, let me just say I love hearing from people. I love hearing about people's journey. I'm happy to have them join my little moon group. I feel it is so important that we each do what we can do to bring that beautiful gift to the world right now, because we're here for a reason and the world needs us to show up.
Yes. Without sacrificing ourselves and our health, right? We can redefine success in a way that allows us to honor and care for our own self and our own health, while also benefiting the world in a way that only we can, you know? Well, thank you,
Now that's
everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. If you're joining us on YouTube, go ahead to the comments section, share questions, reflections, contributions, anything at all that you would like to share down there. We will engage there, and it will be able to support this community in cultivating a place where we can connect and for it to be meaningful and helpful for all. Until next time, may you all experience much success in a way that's meaningful to you and that ripples out to make positive effects in the world. Bye, everyone. Links related to this episode can be found in the show notes section. Want to submit questions about success, satisfaction, healing, and relationships, health, or work? You can do that free and anonymous at drtonywarner.com, where you'll find other resources there as well. Did you benefit from this episode? You can subscribe, like, and share with another to pass it on, because anyone can listen on the go with this podcast audio available on all major podcasting platforms.